What is going on, you guys? So today I have another super quick episode for you. This one is from a podcast called First Things Thirst with Mike Thurston. And the episode is titled Property is a Scam, The Mortgage Trap. And this guest on here is Simon Squibb. Let's hop into it.
I wanted to touch on briefly property because we nearly got onto that before we started the podcast. You don't believe that you should own property?
I think the property business is a scam.
Mm-hmm.
And I should caveat it by saying I bought a home, a massive home in the country. So I bought that home because I'm English and my subconscious just can't fucking not do it. And we're all like in England, everyone wants to own a home, right? And also, for some reason, when my son was born, I wanted him to have a stable place to live, right? Having kids changes everything. I would even say that my argument I'm about to make about why no one should own a home, there's probably caveats to it, and one of them is kids, right? You want stability for your kids. But this is my problem with it. How long have I got? This is a very long potential download on this shit.
No, it's fine. Go wild.
Yeah. Okay, first of all, let's take the sector of the property market that people accept as it's definitely worth owning a home you live in because it's better than rent, right? That's the argument, rent versus mortgage. My experience as someone that's made a lot of money is that I don't want to be stuck in one location because I own a house. I don't want to put my savings, including the deposit, into a house, especially when I was young. If I put that money on deposit on a house, and then on top of that, I'm spending money keeping the house, making it nice, I have to fix the washing machine, I have to fix the fence that's been blown over, I have to fix the guttering, I have to do all these things and not the landlord. My mind is taken up, the most important part, and then also resources are slowly being sucked out of you. Owning a home costs money. It's not free when you own a home. And then, of course, the mortgage rates can go up and all these things. I would rather rent, and if the landlord lifts the rent, move somewhere else, especially when I'm young, I don't have kids, right? And I'd rather move where the opportunity is. And so that's the first step. Understand that it's not rent versus mortgage. Sometimes it's mortgage versus freedom. Understand the real framing of it, because people are stupid when they say it's mortgage versus rent. Example, I started my gardening company, as I mentioned earlier, and I had nowhere to live at first, and then I moved into a squat. And then when I did the deal with the cricket club, I moved into the cricket club shed where I kept all the equipment, and I had free office, and I had free accommodation, and I was able to put all the money I was making back into the business, right? When you're young, you can do that. Even when I had a little bit of money, I went to Hong Kong, I still slept on my friend's couch, right? So I think that when you're young anyway, this accommodation thing is a ruse. It traps people. It gets them stuck in a location. It gets them stuck on a monthly fixed cost. Even the mortgage companies say, you can't let someone else live there. You can't do this. You can't do that. Your mortgage infringement, blah, blah, blah. And if you look at the paperwork, you don't actually fucking own the house, right? You're going to pay 4 times more for it by the time you've paid off the mortgage. And technically, the bank owns the house because the bank's using your house to go borrow even more money out in the ecosystem, right? So you don't own it. You're fucking battery for the mortgage company. You're paying that. You're working for the bank. Just be honest about it. At least understand it. Don't go into it thinking you're owning it. You may own it.
Yeah, well, they keep you... The mortgage, it's just another fancy word for debt, right? Your mortgage loan, right? So again, they're using it to their advantage, and a lot of people aren't plugged into the fact that they can do something similar, basically. So why it would be potentially unwise to basically get a loan. Get a debt, right? It's because people talk about both of these in one. I think in the UK probably sounds like it's similar as well. And then the in the US, of course, it's that way too, right? They sort of teach you these are the things that you should do. You should get student debt to go into school, and then you should also get a mortgage on your house. So debt. And then debt, and so they're kind of they're not educating people on these things in actually the fine print before actually getting you into it, right? Because that's the trouble with this. People get into these situations and they're like, oh, I'm in debt, this is bad, right? But then there's people and I'll have to do more research on this myself, right? So I can't claim to be the expert on this. That's a caveat or a preface to this, right? But there's guys like Robert Kiyosaki who, if you see them in interviews, right, they're laughing because they're in a bunch of debt and they're in the property business, but they're actually buying the property with the bank loans and then renting them out to people. right? So like you can see him laughing like as if debt is a joke in that circumstance, but he's also not coming from it from a buyer's standpoint, right? Like from or rather a renter's standpoint, like paying off the mortgage loan as in you're living in the house, he's renting it to people. So he has a bunch of cash flow that way. So it's kind of interesting to hear these sorts of things because we're taught growing up like, oh, like you want to get a mortgage, you want to take out some student loans so you can get yourself through school. Even if it is for something like being a doctor or a lawyer, right? Because like you saddle yourself with that debt, right? And I think in rare occasions it's worth it. Although I think a lot of people are waking up to also the education system and college specifically not being really the best move for a critical thinker and someone who wants to set themselves up for a good life, basically.
Later, assuming you pay the mortgage off in 30 years and not doing a no interest payment thing, which is fucking dumb. You pay it off in 30 years. Let's assume you do that, right? Most people don't because they upgrade, lifestyle inflation, they get kids, they get a bigger house. Most people die in the house they finally own at 65, right?
That's nuts. Because, I mean, same thing, it's like the concept of like when you retire, you're going to do all the things that you really love, right? You're 60, 70, 80, whatever, right? Like, that's a tough time to retire, but like you won't have the same able body you had when you were younger, right? So like all the travel, all the things you wanted to do, you put it off. And maybe you wouldn't even do it at that point because of if you didn't take care of your health. And then he's talking about like, let's just say you pay off the house. I mean, how long do you really have it in your name before you pass away, right? Before you pass on. I mean, and there's all sorts of rules and stipulations around like if someone inherits the house, if you don't do the right kind of paperwork when you hand the house over to somebody, right? Like they get you on a lot of little things, so you have to educate yourself on these things because it's definitely something to really, really learn, make sure that you're up on, so you can make the right moves, basically.
And then what happens? We've got 2 kids because this is the other argument. Well, I'm doing it for my kids. I bought a house. I'm doing it for my kids. I'm doing a job I hate to pay the mortgage, to work for the bank, to own the house, so that my kids have a better life, which is beautiful.
It's beautiful, and you gave your life away. Right, so there's both. Because I agree with him. Right, like it's a great act of selflessness to do that, right, for your family and your kids. Because at a certain point, that becomes the most important thing. Right, I think a lot of people give up the life that they really want in tandem with the family and kids. Because I think people think that they could only have one or the other, and I really don't think that's true. I think you can have both. And that's, I think, where he's getting at, too, is like, you give up so much when you could have had the family and kids, the amazing relationship with them, and the freedom, the creativity to be the person you always really wanted to be.
Sounds beautiful. It's a fucking lie as well. Because what actually happens in the reality, the economics reality, right? Most people don't own a home in a trust because it's expensive to run a trust system. They own it in their own name. That's how the banks want it as well, because they can take it off you in your own name. So what happens when you die is inheritance tax in most countries, especially in England, 45%. So that house that your parents have managed to pay off, if they have managed to pay it off, and haven't got a mortgage to pay for your fucking university education you didn't need, or they haven't paid off, buy some shit car you didn't need, or whatever, getting married costs, whatever they haven't already.
Well, those are, the government being involved in your marriage is another thing, especially in Western societies. That is, a topic for another day, but complicated, and especially for men, usually not really worth it. Like the marriage part, like the commitment part, that's worth it, right? Like having a healthy, awesome relationship, of course, right? But like having the government in these situations involved in your relationship really doesn't make any sense. And I think he's addressing that being essentially like a scam as well, right? Like basically like a tax scam, a government scam, right? And I think that's super important. And he touched on education there, like I talked about, another one that you really have to be careful of.
Remortgage to do all that shit. Let's assume they actually kept it pure and managed to get out of debt and resist get another mortgage, good debt shit. They actually managed to own it and die in it, owning it.
Also, we'll keep going with the video, but he mentioned cars. They finance cars to you, right? So they get you in more debt, so you owe another payment. And cars, worse than homes, are a depreciating asset, right? So like you get, like, let's say you're one of these guys who gets it doesn't matter what kind of car you get, it's always depreciating. But let's say you invest a bunch of money in a supercar, right? Or one of these fancy cars. It's depreciating. And so it's always losing value anyways. And realistically, like you're only, and especially when you see some of these guys who have an ego around it. Like I get it, if you've got it like that, I mean, sure, maybe I would say get one, right? Why not? At the same time, a lot of guys, they have like 10 supercars or things like that. And it's like, again, right? Like if they got it like that, whatever, right? It's just a depreciating asset, and they could be putting their money into other things, right? More beneficial things, like making their money grow more. And honestly, some of them are probably already doing that, right? Because they are making that kind of money, right? So there's like different levels to this. Although, one thing I heard from another guy we'll cover later, named Luke Belmar, is he's not the first person to say this, but he'll say like, why do I need 10 villas or 10 mansions or 10, super nice places across the world? Or why do I need 10 cars, supercars? I can only sleep in one bed at a time, right? I can only drive one car at a time. So like, he probably still splurges a little bit, but like, he realizes that it's a waste, right? So he's a little bit smarter about it. And I mean, I think that's a great point just to keep in mind, because you're sort of getting dinged with another bill when you do that. Like, go ahead, finance your car, and like there can be interest on that as well. So you have to be really careful.
Now you've got 2 kids, let's say. Now those 2 kids, 45% inheritance tax, gone. Now you split the leftover after a bit of tax between those 2 people, those 2 kids. On average, people have 2.3 children in England, right? 2 kids. Now you've got the deposit for the very house your parents have just died in. You have to spend the next 30 years paying that fucking mortgage. It's a treadmill. It's a fucking lie. And then the other side of it is people are like, okay, the property went up 3 times in value, yeah? Gold went up more since 1970 than property, yeah? Gold doesn't require you to fucking change the windows and fix the gutter and all that shit. Okay, storage. Money goes up if you put it into any asset that has value over time.
Well, obviously, he's providing a really good debate, argument, or great points there. I mean, and, I hope that this is helpful for you in some way if you haven't realized some of these things, because at a certain point, like, we're taught growing up, and we're listening to things, and we don't think about these things. Like, we're like, oh yeah, okay. So the people are telling you, oh, you should do that. You should do this. This is a good move for you to make. And you don't question it until you reach a certain point. And hopefully you reach that point, because I think some people don't wake up to it eventually. But reaching this point where you start to wake up to it, you're like, oh, like that really isn't a good move. And actually, one last thing I was thinking of during this, I'd be curious to learn more in this avenue or this pathway. But related to this, I heard someone recently say that what we were talking about with like someone owning a bunch of like 10 supercars or 10 mansions across the world, right? It's like you're like, billionaires don't really think that way, but millionaires do. So it's kind of a funny thing to think about. Like they'll say like billionaires will rent, right? Or billionaires will maybe they'll just have like one place, right? But billionaires don't have all these things, and they're not trying to show off, right? It's like, I mean, of course there's like smart millionaires too, but what they're saying is like, you've got the millionaire, or like the person who's really wealthy, who is essentially showing off out of insecurity, versus the one who's smart with their money, right? And the billionaire probably knows a little bit better about what to do, versus someone, not to say that there aren't millionaires on their way, right? But it's just like, I mean, who would you rather take advice from? The billionaire or the millionaire? The billionaire who has less things and seems to be very happy with their lifestyle, or the millionaire who is very like, they're peacocking essentially, like, oh, look at all these supercars and look at blah blah blah, right? Like, it's like you can tell that there's a level of like insecurity there, like, and I'm not saying like, maybe if you reach a certain point, like, celebrate your wins, right? Celebrate your wins. Now, I think at a certain point too, like, if you've got a Balenciaga t-shirt with holes in it, like holes that they fashioned or designed into the shirt, like I think we both know that's a little bit ridiculous. And really, like the if we're going to use that example too, like there's that guy versus the billionaire with a t-shirt that's just like a black t-shirt with no logo on it, and you wouldn't even know because he's quiet. He doesn't need people to know that he's a millionaire or that, right? Because like think about what you attract in those situations, even in a dating sense, right? Like if you're showing out like that, you're probably attracting women who just want the money versus letting them find out so you can actually filter or vet for a better quality woman. Anyways, I think this video is a really good one. Simon Squibb and Mike Thurston both have really good content, so I recommend checking out their podcasts. I'm not sure if Simon has one, but he did one with Luke Belmore actually recently, so I would check that one out as well. And First Things First is the name of Mike Thurston's podcast. So I hope this video was helpful for you. If you liked it, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. You got this, bro.